You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the Meta. The Meta controls everything. The Meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching The Meta Show.
And we're live. Welcome, everyone, to this week's Meta Show. We have survived the holidays barely, and I'm here assuming that nothing has exploded with a few of our friends. We have a Nominate J Amazingness and invisible guest, Asher Elias. You can't see him. We don't have a nameplate for him. He lost to Jackdaw, so he can't have a nameplate. We took
Can you
that
put a
away.
picture of John Cena up for me?
If you can find one, I'll totally put one
All
up
right.
for you. That'd be fantastic. Oh my. So here we are, which is something that I'm a little bit surprised to be able to say. Um, Today's adventure was Mittens misses meetings. I actually found Stellaris 2 days ago, and I proceeded to miss the Illume meeting and the Star Chamber meeting this morning because I was up until 8 in the morning, I think, playing computer games. Set an alarm and promptly slept through absolutely everything, which was fantastic. But we're here. We're alive. The holidays are over, and Eve continues. Um, so hopefully, between Jay, Asher, and Nominate, we will figure out what's going on. It actually seems like there's a fair amount happening in Eve. There's a massive battle earlier in the week where almost half a trillion ISK was destroyed. There's a war taking place between the Russians and the Chinese that not too many people seem to be aware of. Jay, what can you tell us about this?
If Jay's not there for some reason, I can talk about
Oh, wait. Fuck, I was using the wrong fucking Twitch to talk to you. Just getting up on Mumble.
Oh my God. All right. Well, we're already off to a great start. I see Jay was busy subscribing with Twitch Prime rather than pushing to talk. So, excellent.
So, after, Triumvirate kind of, died, the war over Innsmouth sort of kicked off again, because the Chinese obviously want control of it, and the Russians obviously want to have it as their renter space. So, they've had a few battles over this week. Two major Super Cat battles and a lot of fun and engaging Intosis wars of 100 interceptors rolling around. So we're going to focus on the interceptor fleets, obviously, and not the Super Cat fights.
Right.
Of course.
As one should, because that's.
So I've been talking about this conflict for a little bit, and I'm calling it the RMT war because I know CCP will hate that if it gets picked up. But you have the longtime RMT champions who have owned this space mostly off and on, but mostly on for a decade, versus the upstart newcomers who are 90% alpha clones, but they can fly battleships in alphas now. And
One thing that is really interesting about this is that people always assume that the fraternity and their allies, because they're Chinese, they're newbies. They're not. They're very, very experienced players. They just haven't got the SP yet because they've switched servers.
I mean, that's one of the things that in science fiction, there's tropes of, you have an alien race from another galaxy, and then the first part of that is figuring out, well, wait a second, they don't fight like us. Like, this was similar to when Goonswarm first started playing Eve. We had an advantage, even though we didn't have SP, because we were using tactics that people in Eve just didn't use. So I'm wondering if what we're seeing in this war, where you have a bunch of Chinese players coming over from the Serenity server, are they bringing new tactics that we just haven't seen that much on Tranquility that are harder to counter?
I wouldn't say harder. They use different styles. In boxing, sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who is either wild or unknown to you, even if he's not technically as gifted. And in that way, they're using different stuff. They're evolving pretty quickly. I've been talking to a lot of Chinese guys, and one thing that I've learned is that since most Chinese players can't pay for their account, then people who can, either through Plex or paying cash, are the most valuable because they can fly T2 Logi in the fleet. So everyone who pays for their account flies like a T2 ship like a Logi or maybe a Hugin, and then the rest of the alphas are all training towards battleships because you can run battleship as an alpha.
You sometimes see that these fleets have 130, 140 max and 60 exequiors instead of Oneros. It's pretty funny to see.
That is one of the unintended consequences. I don't imagine that CCP expected that Nullsec would almost immediately start using fleets of Alpha Max, or did they? I mean, a Nominate You're Here. There's a CSM summit that's coming up later, next week or something like that. Is this something that you are? So, congratulations to CCP. They extended the range of alpha clones, and now people can fly Max in nullsec combat and not pay CCP money for the privilege. Is this intended?
That was pretty much our first reaction when we saw the new skills. It's, wait a minute, you're letting alpha clones fly Machariels. And yeah, that seemed fully intended.
I mean, from a practical perspective, is there anything, so an entity like the Imperium or just Goonswarm, I mean, there is nothing stopping us from having every single player have a mirror account that can at least fly a Mac as their little militia guardsman alpha clone person, right? So what happens if
I'm not so sure that that's going to hold up, because when you do it on a full fleet scale, if you have one fleet of alpha clone Machariels versus another fleet of omega clone Machariels, unless the omega clone FC really screws up, they have such a huge edge that they're just going to win. Like those 5 and 10% bonuses will just compound over the fight, and the alpha fleet is at a pretty severe disadvantage. And so where I think it becomes useful is when you can add the alpha clones to the omega fleet rather than just having the pure alpha fleet.
That is this is where I want to tap in Asher. I mean, Asher, you are the Imperium's 23rd best FC, or maybe 24th.
Ever hopeful.
Yeah,
hopeful for improvement.
One never knows. And you're on the front lines of something that we're not openly acknowledging as a conflict. So since the expanded alphas have gone in, what's your take on it? Have you seen any use outside of the Chinese-Russian wars, and what do you think it says for the sort of strategic layer of the game if these are options for alliances?
Certainly, a lot of people have been talking about them. There's talk of, build a Ferox guy to stay home and defend, or build a Stabber guy to attack the Goonies when they're not there. I think that they're more useful. I know, Mittens, you and I both love to talk about fleets in being, and
Yes.
their mere existence is more useful at keeping people from deploying. The fact that if we deploy away, someone could just bring in 300 alpha Intosis dudes is threatening enough that it makes us think twice about it, and that's true for everyone.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it sort of sticks together with a lot of the other mechanics that we're having, is like when you have the ability to just we could attack them, but they have all these max, they have infinite well, actually it's already staged resupply, right? Like if somebody attacks stealth hypothetically, and then there's either the risk of us having a million max just sitting in hangars ready to jump back into a fight after they've gotten destroyed. That's one thing. Do you think that we're going to see people be able to defend their homes with just alphas while deploying the omegas?
Some people. So I've been looking at the intelligence, looking at what other alliances are doing, and I'd say that the majority are looking at it offensively, like, hey, if our enemies or just people we don't like attack us or someone else, we'll go fuck with them. But if there are some alliances that are saying, hey, when we deploy, you need to have this kind of alpha clone ready to defend our space. And that idea is that, so you can defend against those kind of attacks, the sort of lower investment alpha attacks that people are doing. A lot of this is theoretical now. We haven't actually seen it in use, so it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. It's going to be really weird if we have to fight this sort of shadow war with regular deployments, and then you're logging off all your main accounts, logging on your alpha to defend your home space.
Is that better though? I mean, the one of the
No,
challenges.
frankly, no.
Yeah. Okay.
They say there's no silver bullet to like kill something. Well, there's no shitty bullet that CCP has made that put us in this situation. It's a bunch of like little different things that have added up to us being where we are now.
Well, that is.
This was something that came up when we were first discussing alpha clones, which is, if like this is why you can't log in an alpha clone and an omega at the same time. It's because the minute you let that happen, suddenly if you have an omega, you must have an alpha there with you at all times.
From a certain perspective, you almost must have one anyway, though. I mean, just anything in nullsec that provides an advantage, especially now that we're seeing that the Chinese are already deploying alpha Mac fleets, then that essentially means that everybody has to get with the program, at least as having a garrison fleet that might be used. I mean, it's free. The question is, we are in a scenario where, with the exception of this Russia-Chinese thing, most of the time people don't or can't go to war in Fazisov unless there's something that they can actually take and own, which happens pretty rarely because there's enough space to go around by and large. So we haven't really seen the impact of the alpha clones of that. The hope would be that the alpha clones would allow people to deploy, right, or to allow people to defend their space and actually engage in offensive gameplay while still holding territory. Has there a nominee? I know you can't really tell us everything, but when you are going to the summit in a week, I guess the question is, did CCP think about this holistically in the sense of, hey, we're going to expand the alpha clones and this is how it's going to impact the Fazisov stagnation issue? Or are they really just, are they throwing darts at a wall? What can you tell us about their thought process that's not NDA'd?
I'm not sure there's anything I can say about this that wouldn't either violate NDA, make someone mad, or both.
That augurs poorly. Well, I mean, the different question then is, if you're going to be in Iceland next week, what are you personally intending to advocate for?
I personally don't see the state of alpha clones as all that bad. I think it's been successful at getting more people in the game, been successful at keeping more people in the game, and whatever problems are coming from them are not really that important compared to what it's done in terms of getting people in the game and keeping people around.
Do we know that alpha clones are? I mean, so first of all, that's good. If your reaction is, hey, this is all right, it's not the biggest sucking chest wound. Is there something that the players can see that's not NDA'd that indicates whether this program has been a success or a failure?
Well, it's been successful within Goonswarm. I mean, we have Karma Fleet. Karma Fleet relies quite a lot on picking up new players in alpha clones and converting them into omegas.
That's a fair point. Have we seen an uptick in that for the people who aren't aware of all of the vital statistics of Goonswarm? Like, have we seen a demonstrable success in terms of more alpha players coming in since CCP expanded the roles of alphas?
That I don't actually know.
Because that's really the question here, in my mind, is alphas used to be little baby ships, and you could barely fly more than a frigate, and it was kind of but you could at least try Eve out. And now you can fly all the way up to a Macarial. Now we see Chinese fleets with, all alphas fighting over the RMT territory, as Asher accurately calls it. And so this has suddenly created an entire set of fleets, and off time zone wars, which is great, I think. But is this increase in capacity for the alpha clones, something that's actually well, I guess I answered my own question, didn't I? Because what Jay was bringing up here was the idea that the Chinese players don't have Omegas. So essentially, we are seeing more content being put into the game, right? I mean, is that a fair assessment, Jay, that we're actually seeing like the effect of the alpha clones for real in a content generating way?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing more things happening. Like before, say the alpha clones didn't exist, this war wouldn't happen. I wouldn't have thought, or it wouldn't be as interesting as it is. It would just be Omega players fighting over Solve, which isn't too fun.
As Bombardier, I should say, is saying here in chat, that he is, as a newbie recruiter, seeing that there is a lot of alphas coming in through chat. So that's good. So, I mean, maybe it is a sign of success. If you're seeing fleets full of alpha clones engaging in Sob Nullsec gameplay, do you think that the Chinese actually want to take the Northeast for real, Sob-wise?
Yes, I've been talking to some Chinese players, and there's a big Chinese recruitment push going on, saying nationalistic, jingoistic kind of way, saying it's China versus Russia, it's China versus USA, and we need to prove China's number one, and we're going to do that by taking their space. So first versus Russia, and so that's how they're selling this.
I think that there's a lot more interesting part of this than the whole alpha and omega thing, and that's that we're watching the rise of a new community within Eve, completely separate from the existing community. And this is something that hasn't happened for many years. So, like, this is something that actually stands to change the game as we see it and as we play it. And
not since Test brought Reddit in is probably the last time this has really happened.
Right.
Yeah, that's fascinating because essentially it's the birth of a new block. You could make the argument that Test bringing Reddit in, and then later the after that there was a mass migration into Brave Newbies, but all of the Reddit community is dispersed, right? As opposed to, in this case, it's the classic setup of like a Red Alliance back in the early days of Eve, which is here are a huge group of Chinese players. There are also Chinese players in Goonswarm Federation, but outside of Goonswarm Federation, it's pretty much just Goonswarm and Fraternity. So there's this exodus from Serenity. People are coming in, and they are only going to most likely play in organizations that are, language friendly, right? So Goonswarm has a bunch of people who can actually speak Chinese because we're prepared for this. But outside of that, especially if there's a nationalistic oomph behind it, these might be the only players who have the capacity and the will to actually take the drone rented territories from the Russians. And fuck, I don't know. Nobody has made a serious play at owning the drone regions ever that I can think of. Can any of you remember a time when anybody's actually gone after the drone regions?
MC took them. MC took them from the Russians and rented it for a while until the Russians got it back.
I missed that, I guess. Was that? I suppose that's true because they did. Yeah,
2014.
That was after the Halloween War. Yeah. But in general, that just hasn't really been done for most of the history of the drone regions. It's either been Death or Maktep, Mastater, if you want to pronounce his name correctly, Solar or Legion of Death, holding the Northeast and renting it out, mostly undisturbed. I guess Razor is up there. Somebody, Lord Ziza, is pointing out that PL and Razor ended up taking the Northeast for a bit, and that is true. I think what happened was I think I mentally edited that out because was it Death had hired PL in theory to take out Solar in one of those slap fights? I forgot.
Yeah, yeah, that happened a while ago.
Yeah.
And Death has never been, he's always used mercenaries, and he's never been afraid to hire them. I mean, look at him. He had Darkness attacking them, a few months ago, and now he's hiring them to shoot Tri. Darkness are going down. They're sending like 300, 400 people. When I say Darkness, I mean Guardians of the Galaxy.
Right.
They're sending down 300 to 400 people to watch 3 Russian dreads doing Tosazops. Like that happened a couple days ago. They went like 50 jumps to watch Russian dreads, 3 of them do Tosazops for 3 hours.
Do you think that's going to work in a fight against the Chinese, American and English speaking mercenaries against a nationalist-inspired mass fleet of?
Well, thank you for asking, so I can segue into talking about that giant battle where the Russians got
here we go.
Have you seen that battle report? The Russians jumped in a bunch of Titans with no faxes. Like 5 faxes to support their Titans.
445.
There's two fights here.
All right, Jay, what do we got?
So the first fight was more of a gank. That occurred on New Year's Day, and the Russians lost 445 bill worth of Titans and supers. So it's 3 Titans and 5 supers, and a bunch of other caps and dreads. They had 5 faxes. I have more fax salts than the Russians fielded there. So, yeah, Solar really dropped the ball on that one, and they ended up paying for it. There's a video here, actually. I'll link it. The video is pretty cool. Just right-click, translate to English on that page, because it's a Chinese website. You also have the second fight, which is the more interesting one, which happened yesterday over Fortizar in Smother, which is the final tunnel. FRT bought 800 people, which is quite scary at like 1300 EVE. Yeah, they bought 116 dreads, 56 carriers, and 300 battleships, along with like 100 other T1 cruisers.
That is, Nominated is right. This is the birth of a new block. We have a person here in chat who's claiming to speak for FRT, saying that we're full of shit about. I'm trying to figure out what we're full of shit about. Please tell us about if they don't actually intend to take the Northeast. But wow, this is the danger. We saw this in history. I don't know whether it's actually a good historical analogy or not, but if you end up relying on mercenaries to do everything for you, the fear is that you end up, just sort of getting your asses handed to you. But to be fair, the DRF did win this fight, sort of.
They killed the Fortizar that was in their space, so they ended up paying for it. Though they lost. Actually, no, they ended up winning the battle report. They
225 to 370.
They also lost. They lost the Nyx though, which is bound to happen in these sort of fights. Like when someone DCs and
lower the volume of the notifications. Yeah, we are getting. Thank you guys. We're getting a ton of subscribers. Because Boat isn't with us, which is unfortunate. I am hosting the show today, so there's going to be lots of little errors in terms of quality because I am unfortunately not a professional like Boat is. But I do appreciate all the subs so I'm seeing a bunch of people. I haven't been giving shout outs because we've been talking a lot. But yeah, I'll see about trying to lower the notification spam. This is the big thing is that the galaxy is divided into quadrants, right? And historically speaking, blocks have either taken a quadrant for themselves functionally, like each entity that is largest and strongest pretty much naturally ends up in one of these 4 quadrants. And then you end up with the iceberg entities, which theoretically don't have a quadrant, but PL and NC. Have often had ties to a given regional area. If the Chinese players come en masse, which they have done, and they carve out a time zone that they themselves own. Like we are seeing the birth of a completely new block. The question then is, what happens if the Russians, who've been relying too much on mercenaries, if that's true, where do they go, and how long is it going to take for them to lose? What's the pace of this war so far? Jay, Asher.
It's totally out of our time zone. It seems like really, like we're speculating when we say they want Russian space. They're fighting, but I mean I think that won't happen for a little bit now. But we don't know. I mean, I don't really understand the Chinese player or the Chinese mind. I don't know what their plans are, but it definitely seems like they are slow playing it. Like if you looked at it from a Western perspective, this is exactly what we'd be doing. We'd be saying we're not interested. We're just here for good fights. We're here for fun. All this kind of stuff. And then we would be going for the region, and hopefully before they realized it.
I mean, I think it would be fantastic. EVE needs a shakeup and also needs a multi-time zone shakeup. We haven't had a new time zone. These other migrations of players like Goonswarm coming into EVE or Test coming into EVE or Brave Newbies coming into EVE have always sort of fit into pre-existing time zones. And so now we're seeing not just the birth of a new block, but the birth of a completely. I mean, there was a small Chinese time zone before this exodus from Serenity, but now these numbers are fucking crazy, which is fantastic. I think we need conflict. I think the galaxy needs less space in general. I think one of the reasons why we haven't seen that much in the way of serious nullsec fighting is that by and large people have been content. There's enough to go around, and that makes for, I think, kind of a boring galaxy. I don't know. Anomaly, have you seen anything from a CSM perspective about making this server more accommodating for Chinese players, or is CCP still sort of like acting like Serenity is not going anywhere and everything's fine?
I suspect they have contractual obligations with the Chinese company that runs it that prevents them from doing anything too overt.
Yeah, because we're in this sort of a weird place where CCP hasn't officially acknowledged that anything is happening to Serenity. Is that correct?
No, not that I'm aware of. And it doesn't seem to be that they're actually shutting it down. It just seems that Serenity is running, but it's a ghost town. There's nobody actually running it.
That makes sense. So, I mean, this is sort of a frightening lesson for any online game, is the fear of a loss of social critical mass and an actual like failure cascade, which is sort of what that entire server had. So we have thousands of Chinese people coming to play on Tranquility. One of the questions that was asked in chat a few minutes ago is, what happens if the Chinese government bans EVE Online? From my understanding, most of the people who are playing over here are using a VPN in the first place to get over or under the Great Firewall, to be able to play on Tranquility already. I don't know whether that's something that is being done legally or illegally, in whichever. I know nothing about Chinese law, but it's fascinating. We would like to have some more Chinese guests on the Meta Show. We've brought some people from Goonswarm on before. I know that they don't typically get along with the fraternity guys, but we are, we need to collectively, as the English-speaking player base, we need to wake up and pay attention to this shit, or else. I need to do better about actually ending every sentence with a question when I'm hosting this thing, because I pontificate and then I pause instead of like throwing the ball to somebody like Asher or Jay.
Well, something you were saying before is about there being enough space. I don't think that's actually the issue. I think the issue is just that travel has gotten so much harder, and fatigue and all of that. They made they designed travel in the galaxy for where we were a few years ago in terms of player counts, and that made sense. The current travel difficulties make sense when you go back that far, but for the player base we have today, everything is too far apart, and you have to go. Just traveling to attack somewhere is too difficult, basically.
That's a good point. I mean, between space aids all the way around, plus, and then when you do actually succeed in traveling there, once you get to the destination, then you're dealing with the FozzieSov bullshit. I want to ask Asher here. I mean, like I said earlier, Nominate is going to Iceland next week. Asher, as a FC, and Jay is also an FC, but he hates talking. Asher, as an FC, what would you like the CSM to change? Would it be travel? Like, where do you think that the advocacy needs to be focused? Is it travel issues? Is it mechanics of FozzieSov? If you could hand and nominate a bullet-pointed list of things to bring to Iceland to nail on the door of CCP's office, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a few problems. One is, I think, getting rid of jump bridges. Jump bridge fatigue was a real issue. I think that should not have been done. I mean, what I mean to say is adding jump bridge was pretty bad choice overall. I think that basically they've spent a lot of time trying to make the game more defensive, and I think that's a terrible idea. One example I like to use is if you were building an RTS, like you were making Age of Empires 4, would it make sense to make all of the walls and turrets better than the attacking units? No, because then people would just build walls and turrets, and the games would take forever, right? Well, CCP has effectively done that. They've made citadels and citadels so strong that no one wants to attack them, and you have a scenario where people are disincentivized from attacking you.
Do you think
everyone has their super capital umbrellas?
That's part of it.
But it's so hard to move them that everyone just leaves them home. So anywhere you go, you're facing the local super capital.
It's turtling. Yeah, exactly.
The only content, if you're roaming, basically the only content for super capital pilots in general is dropping on frigates or anybody dumb enough to come invade the walls of a heavily defended castle like idly. So if you are, if you take a frigate into Delve, suddenly you have hundreds of Titans just eager to drop on you because it's something to drop on, because going far afield is a huge pain in the ass. So it seems like it's a set of layered shitty incentives. Nominate if they made. I mean, what would you suggest? I mean, besides our classic suggestion of just deleting all Titans and Supercaps, which doesn't work because apparently Goonswarm now has more Titans and Supercaps than anybody, according to a recent Reddit post analyzing the kill boards.
I mean, we don't really need the kill boards or anything like that to know that we have more ships than people have in their alliances. So
yes, which is a pretty good smug line, but that's the question. I guess there's all these chicken or the egg problems because each of these different mechanics seem like they're stacking on top of each other to reward the kind of defensive turtling gameplay. Is it defensive and turtling to leave your supercaps at home, or is it just you're leaving your supercaps at home because they're such a pain in the ass to move that functionally it seems like defensive and turtling? Nominate, you're a CSM representative. What do you think should be changed?
I think what we need to see is easier strategic movement. Not like there's a fight up north, we're going to deploy our super capital fleet into that fight. But I think it needs to be easier to say we're going to take our super capital fleet and over the coming week deploy it to this other region. And we're actually, I think, surprisingly close to that. There's just a few things with like Citadel mechanics that make that a little wonky.
Why, this is sort of a thing. CCP, of course, got rid of teleportation by adding the jump fatigue mechanic, but it makes me wonder if it would be better to reduce jump fatigue and perhaps introduce more of like a hard limit. Like you can only jump so many jumps per day, but you're not dealing with space aids that fucks your gameplay over the next 20. Well, actually, that wouldn't work because then you could stack up to 24-hour timers. What would you change then? If you think that we're close, what do you think should be done?
Mostly make fix bumping on Citadels.
Citadel's the 6-day timer is ridiculous. It's just so much time. Citadels are overpowered in pretty much every way. We should be taking them. And when I say we, I mean the game designers should be taking them down 2 or 3 notches. Go to 1 or 2 timers. The Evor is super strong. I'm worried that they're going to give this GTFO to like Astraeus, which will be stupid broken. and they're going to leave those 250 kilometer scrams. Like, it just makes assaulting them so unappealing because you just have to have 2 times their numbers to blow up a citadel. Like, right as it is, you just have to have a huge advantage. So why would we go look for an even fight? We would only look for stomps, right? That's all we want because we can't take even fights. I'm just speaking for anyone here, anyone who wants to, run a a fight or a war. You would just look for things where you can fight against their citadels. They're just poorly designed. That's all I can say about it.
Well, I wonder. I mean,
you're absolutely right. They are way too strong defensively.
Well, aren't they already looking to be changing the way that Citadel defensive mechanics work? I mean, they announced that at Vegas. Does that go far enough?
We'll see. I guess hopefully some info comes out soon. Right now, they don't look that great, but the shield timer is a nice start. That's better than nothing. But you're still looking at I don't know, way too much effort to kill a citadel that costs $2 billion to drop like an Astruus. I've been defending Astruus. They're super strong. They're incredibly strong, and it's been nice to be defending them. But it sucks if you're trying to attack them. And I think this game needs to encourage more attacking.
Do you think that the issue lies primarily at the Astruhus level? Because I mean, one of the things that Bleezy is pointing out here in chat is that we blow up Fortizars all the time, right? Is it really the price point of Astruhuses that makes the Astruhus itself, like the lower level citadels taking advantage of the defensive mechanics, that's where the imbalance is? Or do you think it's all of the citadels equally?
We do blow up Fortizars all the time. Like, I haven't really experienced that.
Well, I don't know who the we is that he's speaking for.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we could blow up Fortizars relatively frequently. It's just a matter of do we have the greater force? Yeah, they're just too power multiplicative. Even Fortizars and Keepstars. I think the game would be better if they were less defensible. It's a fine balance because you don't want people going in and you don't want someone like us just running out over someone's entire space because we could. You want to make it at least have some pain point, but you also want to avoid what we have now, which is where everyone's encouraged to turtle.
Well, I want to bring us to a slightly different topic here that I've been asked to discuss, which does relate to the CCP and CSM dynamic. But there is a major change to the point that somebody was telling me that Eve Central was going to cease to exist because of this. I don't know if that's true or not, but the Eve's XML API is getting shut down, and I have no idea what that means, except that sensible people that I know are extremely unhappy about it. Nominate, can you explain to us what the hell this change means and what the player base should expect from it?
Pretty much it means that everything that has ever been written that uses the API needs to be rewritten. Or at least significantly modified to work with the new system. There are some features being removed, which are troubling.
The account status.
That's the big one, is no more account status through any API.
So that means that you won't be able to see whether somebody is alpha or omega?
Or you won't be able to see if you're on character sub.
Right, you won't be able to see how long is left on your subscription.
Oh, okay.
And this is something that we've pushed on the CSM. They're trying to remove personal information from the API. So, like, account-specific information as opposed to character-specific information is information about the player, not the character in the game.
So Plaid Rabbit is saying in chat that under this proposed change that you won't be able to find all the characters on the account either.
Right, same thing.
So this is kind of a massive metagame change as far as counterintelligence goes. Like, so under this change, we all collect full APIs. Most nullsec alliances do to try to monitor who has what characters on what account to register alts. What's going to happen from that?
Well, anyone who's ever wanted to spy but didn't want to make a dedicated account for it, well, you've got your chance coming up.
Wow. Okay. That is huge. One of the biggest barriers to entry for people spying is the need for a dedicated paid account. So here is another thing. Like, there's a lot of people who want to try their hand at spying, and because you need to have a clean account, they don't typically do it. Because you have to get a whole separate account, you have to go all this through this investment. But essentially now anybody who has a spare alt slot can have a full-scale agent character. That is fucking crazy. I mean, it's great if you like metagaming, which I do. But wow, has this been brought up? Like, is CCP aware of the implications of this change?
Yep, they absolutely are.
Yeah, it's been talked about a lot, and they're saying that account information doesn't belong on the API.
Okay. I mean, it kind of makes sense from a role-playing perspective, but I don't know. Jay, what do you think?
Well, it's a legal perspective is a big part of it.
Someone with 11 plus accounts, up to 16, 17 sometimes some months. I have characters training, all 3 slots are training all the time. If the main sub lapses and I have to log in all 3 characters and restart the training queues, it's just a giant hassle for me. I'm not very happy about this change.
Is there a way that you can set up EveMon? Well, I guess no, because everything has to be rewritten.
Right.
EveMon will be going away because it's going to die.
This is one of the things that we're pushing on CSM. At the very least, if they're not going to give us an API to get this information, put it in the launcher. Let us, fire up the launcher and see all of our subscription times and when things are going to run out.
So it's not just subscription time that you won't be able to see. You won't be able to see your skill training time?
No, you can see skill training.
Okay, so there's still going to be something from EveMon. When you say EveMon is going away, do you mean that the developers have said, fuck this, we're not going to be updating it anymore?
The developer,
sorry, go ahead.
The developer on Reddit was saying that they haven't worked on it in over a year. So I don't think they're planning on creating an ESI version. So
wow, Eve without EveMon is just a terrifying idea. I mean, this is one of Goonfleet's original gifts to the galaxy was, this is coded originally by a Goonfleet guy, just because managing multiple character training was such a huge pain in the ass. And then when Six Amari retired, he made it open source, and another development team took it up and has been providing that service ever since for more than 10 years now. So, yikes. I mean, that seems worse to me as far as decision making than the opening up the metagame, which is, I think, actually good for people to be able to spy without needing a separate clean account. So CCP, again, I keep asking these questions in a incredulous way because it seems so dumb. And I just got back from the holidays, so maybe my brain is processing things slowly. But CCP is aware that EveMon is going to be busted?
I don't know. I suspect not, but I'm not sure they really have a choice here. There are new data protection laws going in Europe that they're going to have to worry about.
Yeah. Oh, so when you said legally, I was unaware of this. What are the new data protection laws? Is this an EU-wide thing or Iceland specific?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. It's just laws governing how companies can deal with personal information about customers. and so account-wide information would be personal information. And yeah, it's the GDPR for anybody who wants to look it up and bore themselves to death.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, so then in this case, it's not fair. I'm going to back up everything that I was saying. It's not fair to CCP for me to be crapping on them for this, because if they are complying with an EU-wide regulation, then they just don't have a choice in the matter. But that is a huge pain in the ass. Interesting.
And yet the EU might not apply to Iceland, but they do business in Europe, so
they have
they
an
are stuck
office in
with it.
London. So I mean, that's although that that won't apply to the EU pretty soon as well.
That's right. Yeah. Curious. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Sorry, this is one of those moments.
This is where you should throw it to someone else again.
Yeah, sorry. I'm too busy going, wow, what the fuck? Like, we can have an alliance-wide spying program and we could get newbie spying, and like I'm just so focused on the idea of having alpha clones who can immediately start spying in Eve, and all the possibilities for that my brain is just frying. Let's talk about something else. Let's talk about actually what's happening with Guardians of the Galaxy versus Asher Alliance, the Asher Alliance, the 24th best FC in the Imperium. There's been a massive slap fight over one of your favorite Asterhuses.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us about that, and also tell us what you learned about the joys of defending Asterhus?
Well, to give you an idea of how strong the Asterhus are, instead of there's a final timer coming up in 4 days, and instead of showing up again to fight it, they've anchored their own Asterhus off our Asterhus so they can safely tether their carriers. So that should give you an idea, just to take out one man Asterhus, and we're vastly outgunned by them. It's David versus Goliath in this sense, which is funny for goons, but in this case, we just don't have a lot of people there, and they have their entire super capital umbrella, and they still can't really stop us from inflicting massive damage on them, because the Asterhus is such a good force multiplier. And that's where you have to look and say, hey, does this is this intended or not? And to me, I don't think it's exactly what we want to be encouraging.
Well, that doesn't make sense. I mean, I'm going to interject here because,
Sure.
The idea is that Asterhus are too strong defensively,
Yes.
and that's bad. But you are, and that Eve is having people turtle up, and that's bad, and Supercaps umbrellas, and that's bad. But you're using the Asterhus offensively, like you are on offense up north doing things, dropping these things down, aren't you?
Yeah, that's more or less stopped because I mean they're just being serious about defending them. So very soon it won't we won't have any left to defend. And it was nice that we got them down. We mostly got them down to them flying 50 or 100 jumps to help out Russian timers. And if it hadn't been for that, it would have been a lot tougher to get them down. So we took advantage of the situation, and yeah, it's nice. But in general, the vast majority of Citadel usage is in your home space, right? Like for every one offensive Citadel, there are how many?
Like 50 or 100, yeah.
Yeah, defensive ones. And so you have to, Eve players are smart, obviously, and they're going to use every tool you give them to their maximum effectiveness. We were discussing basically the same concept with alphas, right? And so when you're looking at that, you're going, well, I don't think that this was their intended use, but Eve players will always use them the best way that they can.
Do you think that the Russians are going to pull Guardians of the Galaxy to assist them more? I mean, it's slightly different time zone, but Guardians of the Galaxy does have one of the strongest Australian time zones, which is closer to Chinese time zone.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, it's pretty darn close. It'll be interesting. We have a Chinese guy saying that this is not a serious war, that they're skirmishing over small
Means
areas.
it's totally a
It'll kind
serious
of
war, because otherwise they wouldn't be on the meta show trying to argue that it's not a
yeah,
serious war.
right. So, but my point is, if it's true, then yeah, I think Xstat will not give up this, his privileged position without going down swinging. The Russian super fleet is incredibly tiny, right? It's so small for how big they are, for how much money they make. So where has all that money gone? Well, there's a lot of theories, obviously, where that money's gone, right? Um, and if you're a Chinese guy who's running fraternity and what was the other one, Ranger Regiment, that's the two big Chinese ones, wouldn't you want to control wherever that money is going? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Wouldn't you want to be the one who is getting that benefit? You're not getting the Supers and Titans. You're getting something else. Wouldn't you want to get whatever that other something else is?
That is true. I wonder, because I mean a lot of the space in the Northeast had been and I believe still is managed from a rental perspective by NC Dot and Lady Scarlet and that crew. So I know that PL has sort of set up their own little territory in Tenal and is happily doing their thing. But it is going to be interesting, because if the Chinese do displace the Russians, it's not just like the Russian hypothetical RMT empire that gets impacted, right? There's actual nullsec players stand to lose. English-speaking nullsec players stand to lose if this shit goes down. Which brings up the possibility of, will we also see not just Guardians of the Galaxy, but will we see PL or NC Dot move away from this Pravi deployment to go help fight the Chinese? That's going to be fascinating. I mean, Frat is PanFam technically.
That's kind of the most interesting perspective, isn't it? And you've got a time zone where it's harder for we were just talking about this, where it's harder for EU and NA people to help out. So even if they want to, if the Chinese get rolling, and I don't think we're talking about this month. I think we're talking about this year. You're talking about, we're not talking about what's going to happen in 2 weeks. We're talking about what's going to happen in 3 months, in 6 months, in 12 months. If the Chinese get rolling, will it even matter? What NC Dot does? If can they alarm clock every night? Is that possible?
Especially because they put so much force on the field in their time zone. One of the points that was brought up, and I'm going to get back to this, is that Fraternity is technically PanFam, right? But they're PanFam when they were a small alliance of Chinese players in a very big galaxy. When you become the size of a block, your old diplomatic ties don't really matter as much. If they're seriously contemplating taking an entire quadrant of the galaxy, whether they were friends with Pandemic Legion or Pandemic Horde before they quintupled in size, probably doesn't matter that much.
You've heard the Chris Rock bit that a man's only as faithful as his options.
No, I haven't actually, but that sounds pretty accurate all the way around. I don't know, Jay. What do you think?
I haven't really been focusing. I'm sorry, I lost some facts as we're doing a fleet in a minute.
Yeah, as I'm talking, I'm doomsdaying people with a lance right now.
Been tabbing in every few minutes to shoot my doomsday, and just every time I tab in, there's lances going off on our fleet. It's just the fuck.
That's excellent. See, also Bleezy, thank you very much, because he was recommending that I do the "What do you think?" segue, and I managed to do that and catch Jay unawares. So I'm slowly but surely getting better. Nominate, what do you think about the destabilizing impact of the new block, since you identified it?
If you go back far enough, there was a time where we were under the Russians and dependent on them. Things changed as organizations grow. They're new, they're playing the game, they're working with the people that will work with them and advance them within the game.
Yeah, I mean, Frat was NC aligned when they had, 200 active people, which is sort of to Mitten's point. Are they still NC aligned? I don't know.
Well, they're fighting. They're fighting the people who have been paying. I mean, let's be real about this. The Russians have been paying PL and NC Dot in supers or in ISK off and on for years. So to say that Fraternity is working with PanFam is a happy part of that when they are biting the hand that feeds PL and NC Dot, that doesn't quite work out anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it'll just depend on how serious it is. I mean, and that's the other thing is that Fraternity may be telling, NC, oh, we're just playing around, and they're just playing around until they've got 5 regions.
Just a prank, bro.
Yeah, it's just a prank. You're just playing around until you got 5 regions in space, and then our options have changed. Our views are different.
We have adapted to the new climate. Everything.
But does NC give a shit? Like if Frat is disposed to help them, if they say, hey, if you take over from the Russians, we'll just keep the same deal we had with them. Fraternity is gonna be like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a good point.
NC.
Yeah, actually, because it doesn't really matter to NC because as long as they're able to run their rental empire in peace, whether the Russians or the Chinese are the ones who have the Sov and the other areas of the drone regions that they're not renting out, there's more than enough space to go around. So,
right. Whoever doesn't matter who signs the paycheck, just that the bank cashes it, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'd be very curious to see what happens because we might see a resurgence. I mean, I think it would be a good thing because nationalism might be bad for the world history, but it's great for content in EVE. Is a resurgence of Russian nationalism. I mean, nothing will make nationalistic, fury stoked quite like one side being really nationalistic. Then if the other side is kind of like, well, we're a bunch of Russians and we have our factions and our differences, then it instantly becomes a sort of nationality versus nationality thing.
And I'm sure nothing would make Exdeath happier than to have all the Russians under his banner. I mean, that's but that's something the other Russians who have grown over a decade plus, resentments happen. All kinds of anger grows, and will those Russians ever come under Exdeath, or do they need some new, more compromised leader, someone more acceptable?
It's going to be interesting because that was exactly the setup that held Red Alliance together. Because Red Alliance, of course, back in the day in like 2006, 2007, was Death, Mactep, and Nink, who now all lead their own alliances, and Laka Volterra, who were virulently racist against Russians. If you find some of the old Laka Volterra propaganda videos on YouTube from the early days of EVE, you'll see somebody talking about just insult after insult about like Russians as Russians, and that shared hatred and persecution kept all of those Russian factions together against Laka Volterra, the Southern Coalition, and that was very useful. So yeah, you're right. We might see a resurgence of Russian unity in the face of a Chinese threat. It's pretty much World War III, the video game, at this point.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, Mittens. How would we get involved in that, if at all?
Off the top of my head, I would say that we would sit back and make some fucking popcorn.
Right.
Because this is the interesting thing about this is that from a European or American player perspective, this is a type of war that is very difficult for so even if we wanted to participate in a mess like this, it would be very difficult for us to do so. We would first of all have to check with our own Chinese players and find out what the Chinese in Goonswarm would prefer to do.
I believe the Chinese in Goonswarm do not like Fraternity.
I think they hate Fraternity, and in general we like the Russians. So I mean, if we were going to intervene on a side, it would probably be on the side of the Russians. But
remember what Anominate said about the Chinese aren't newbies; they lack skill points. The Chinese don't lack an ideology, EVE Online ideology either. They came over with hatreds and likes, and there are people who hate the Chinese Mittani and love the Chinese Mittani and all that stuff. That already exists. They don't need to develop it.
That's true. Yeah, there's a lot of feuds and bitterness. So that is initially speaking, yeah, and also since fraternity is associated with PanFam at the moment, as far as options go, it's not something that we would want to see. I mean, potentially if they took the Northeast and started funding more caps and supers to PL and NC Dot, even if that is sort of the status quo, I can't see a universe where we would come in on the side of fraternity unless they hit us up with lots of juicy diplomatic options. Then but I kind of doubt it. They don't like Goonswarm, and our Chinese people hate them. Chinese players apparently have a choice of joining fraternity or joining Goonswarm, and everybody who doesn't like fraternity joins us, which is awesome. So fuck them, basically. All right. Well, speaking of not ending a sentence with what you think, we have, I don't know, last week, I don't know how long the Talking Stations went on, but we're over the hour mark here. So I think I'm going to play us off, Keyboard Cat. I saw a broadcast from one of our directors saying that there's going to be a meeting right after Asher and Mittens finally stop talking, which me and Rana is at it again. I don't know if.
I think in general, we've been pretty team today.
I think it has been pretty tame. Like we've kept it under control. This is basically, guys. This is like a Star Chamber meeting that I missed today because we have everybody here from the meeting that I slept through because I was playing Stellaris for 2 days in a row. I have to say that I missed the Stellaris train when it first came out, and it's probably a good thing because it
What
has.
is Stellaris?
What's that?
What is it?
You don't know? Oh my god.
Oh no, not this.
Oh god.
Do I need another time waster in my life?
Someone get Tuzzy on here.
So Stellaris is like imagine Master of Orion, or take Master of Orion and combine it with Crusader Kings 2, and
Oh wow.
it is galactic conquest with lots of detail and lots of strategy and lots of different customizable races.
I can't play this. I mean, I can't.
I lost 2 days to it. I have slept through meetings, which is something that I asked Merkelchen about this before the fireside chat today. I was like, yeah, man, I feel really bad about this, like missing the meeting. I don't think I've ever actually missed a meeting besides traveling before. And he was like, not that he can remember. I like a fucking teenage nerd staying up until 8 in the morning playing this fucking game and then passing out and sleeping through all of my responsibilities. What race did I make? Nominate what's
At least when you were out all night clubbing, you still made the meetings in the morning.
It's true.
You mainline coffee for about 15 minutes.
Yeah, back when I was clubbing all the time, I would make it to the meetings maybe 5 minutes late, but I'd roll out of bed horribly hungover, complain about my hangover, and still be there. But I made a people are asking what race I played. I made an Amarr race. You can make Eve related races in this. I wasn't playing with a mod, but I literally made an Amarr empire that was led by the true Emperor Maximilian Singularity the Sixth, first of his name. You can customize your leader, so I made a Max Singularity, and they were vicious, fanatical slavers and very religious, and yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. So anyway, that's that. I want to thank everybody for coming, and I appreciate our guests who not only have had to put up with me talking here for the last hour, but also had to put up with me missing the meeting earlier today because of Stellaris, because that happened. So thanks a lot and also everybody wish Anominate luck. Anominate, what day are you headed off to Iceland?
Next Saturday.
Next Saturday. All right. Well, if you have any other pleas to petition your CSMs for everybody who's not in Goonswarm, if you annoy and nominate too much, he might shoot you. But for everybody else in the galaxy, keep in mind the CSM Summit is next week, so use your representative pseudo-democracy to its fullest. I appreciate all of our subs. I got a sub here from Toastmaster8 and a whole bunch of other subs. Cocker's God gifted a sub to Dirk McGurk, which is cool, and a whole bunch of other people threw money at the screen. I really do appreciate that, guys, even if I didn't manage to give you a proper shout out individually as we were talking. So we will be here next week. I don't know what we're going to talk about or who we're going to have as a guest, but we're going to do it. And thanks a lot, guys. And now I need to play the intro on our way out, I think. I think that's how this is done. We just play the
He's
intro
itching
again.
to go play Stellaris. That's what he's doing. That's why he's ending the show.
Exactly. Well, we started talking about Stellaris, and then I'm like, I'm leaving. All right, let's play this again.
Oh, happy day. I have 2 Rorquals who are mining not poker.
You are
Oh,
about to
excellent. I should
receive
also turn the
messages
microphone
that
off so
may be
people
harmful
don't get
to
the
your
hint
mental
that
state.
you're going to go nuke them.
Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.